how's everyone doing? It is Monday afternoon. It is 12:50 Knoxville time. We need to see Morty. Morty says, "Hey, he's doing well. We need to He's the bunny we don't pick up so much. He's in the intro right there. That is some Morty right there. You need to see Jolly. Jolly's the happy bunny we get to pick up. But they're both happy bunnies. Morty he doesn't like when you pick him up. He gets a little grumpy right there, but he's so snuggly and happy. But how's everyone doing? Good to see you here, Blake and Shaq and Chase and Jackson and Charles. Lachey, good to see you here. Charles asked some really good questions about interpreting the value of the discrepancy for some 320. What do you say we finish off the homework for 201 and then we do some 320? How's that plan sound? What do people think of my plan right here to finish the 201 homework? We were doing some chapter 5 homework. We kind of sped through the last question right there, and then do some whatchamacallit, do some 320, the candy bar, whatchamacallit. What are people's thoughts on that? I have altered the deal. Sounds good right there. Are we supposed to use Survey 11 data from Roy class for assignment? Is that what I wrote, Jackson? Let me double check. Good question, Jackson. I got to look at my assignment. I need to look. Let's go check it out. The assignment coming up right here. Oh my gosh, so many things. Assignment for Associations Part 2. Did I say? I think I said you can use anything. It seems to be. First time we use the associated function in all items relationship, your card. So you can use any sort of data set you want. Just use any of the data sets you would like, and you just need to make sure you follow the 3 relationships. Follow the 3 relationships. I think I've got the wrong key on here. Let me remove the key, because that is not the right key. Did I not? Oh, I didn't hit save on it. I wrote the key, really? And then, oh my gosh. Well, with that, Brian's gonna have to redo that rubric. We'll redo that rubric. We'll get it done. Let me go over here to the Chapter 5, Part 2 homework. And let's go right here. We'll finish up the homework. We did question 3. And now let's did we do question 4 last time? Looks similar. Okay. So Stat 201, question 4 on the assignment. And we have here at the 353 mark. Let's go do this. Okay, and drop those questions in the chat. We're going to do some 320 here in a moment. So with this question right here, the accompanying histogram shows the distribution of mean ACT score. Now, ACT score to show a histogram must be what? To show a histogram, ACT score must be what? I need some help with this. ACT score must be what to show a histogram, which ACT score is. ACT score must be this. To show a histogram or a box plot or a stem and leaf or a dot plot, then we must have what kind of data, which ACT score is. ACT score is what? So just have these reviewed where you're like, oh, if we're making a histogram, it has to be quantitative. Lachey, great answers right there. Let's throw some 1,000 points. We're just dropping those crazy points. Mubot is awake. He should be. Let's see right here. 1,000 points in the chat. We've just been crazy on those 1,000 points lately because there's a lot of points to get. So it has to be quantitative. So here is the histogram. Looks like it's slightly normal. You see this little bit of bloop down here, a little second smaller mode or some outliers. Whatever we call it, it's either got some left skew. Remember, left to the low. Got a little pull to the low side there. Something going on down here. So let's take a look. If the normal model was appropriate, about 95% of the data would fall within 1 standard deviation. If a normal model were appropriate, about 68% would fall within 1 standard deviation. This is known as the what rule. This rule right here that you see is known as the what rule. 1 standard deviation, 68% of the data, that is known as the what rule. We're going to throw out 100 points from now on for office hours. Well, we'll keep throwing points. The what rule, the 68, and Blake got it there, empirical. So that is true about 1 or within plus or minus 1 standard deviation would be 68% of the data. That is true. The data are bimodal with a high mode and a low mode. Slight bimodality here. You can see the high mode and the low mode. Is that a second mode? Is it outliers? It's kind of a toss-up. So the normal probability plot on the left shows the distribution of these scores. The plot on the right shows the same data with the Milwaukee area schools removed, the lower ones. What do these plots tell you about the shape of the distribution? Okay, so when you look at normal probability plots, and we were doing some analysis on this earlier, when you have normal looking data, a normal probability plot, because this is normal data, will do what? The normal probability plot will do what? When you have normal data, which this is normal data, no outliers down here, no craziness, the normal probability plot will do what? So this is the histogram of normal data. This is a normal probability plot of normal data. So normal data will do what? 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 It'll follow this line. Does that make sense? Normal data will follow that line. But skewed data, so that's a right. Ooh, gosh, we got 2 titles on that? How'd I even do that? Oh, because it already has a title. Oh, it's mad. So, histogram has main. Really? Main equals right skewed data. Oops, there we go. Right skewed data. So this is right skewed data. And now right here, this is the normal probability plot of right skewed data. So with this being right skewed data, it's pushed to the right. So this is the histogram of right skewed data. This is the normal probability plot of right skewed data. So the more the histogram is normal, the more it'll follow the straight line. So let's take a look right here. And if you notice, this is more normal. It really follows the straight line. Where down here, you see the second mode. The weirdness down here at the start of this is due to the weirdness over here. This does not perfectly follow the normal. So when you're looking at it, you see this does not perfectly follow in the lower region. If you remove it, it does follow the normal pretty well. So the shape of the distribution with the Milwaukee area removed is more normal. And they're talking about this right here. If you remove this down here, which is not just removing that, you'd kind of re-standardize. If you were to remove that data and look at a histogram then, it would look more normal. So the shape of the data with the Milwaukee removed is more normal than without the schools, or with the schools rather. Good question right there, understanding how to read the normal probability plots, that the normal probability plot shows normality when the plot follows a straight line. The more it follows a straight line, the more normal it is. Good question. I like that one. I think it's a really good review of normal probability plots and how to read them. But once again, I know I've kind of shown the answers, but the key is to know how to read the plot. So when you get to the test, you understand what to do. Here we are with the second to last question. What kind of graphical display allows us to see if something is normal? Well, let me start by asking you this. I need help in the chat. You ready? Bar charts are used for what kind of data? Bar charts are used for what kind of data? When we have a bar chart, because you can make a bar chart of your favorite pies or a pie chart of your favorite bars, bar charts are used for what kind of data? Bar charts used for what kind of data? Bar charts, not quant. Good answer, Shaq, right there. Not quant. Bar charts, thank you for answering. This is why we practice. Bar charts are used for what kind of data? Because if I ask you your favorite pie or your favorite bar, that's a what question. Bar charts are used for what? Bar charts are used for categorical. Great job, Lachey, right there. Bar charts are used for categorical. But here's the thing. Since bar charts is no longer an answer, that eliminates all of the above, right? Does that make sense? Bar chart can't be the answer because normal data means we're looking at a normal distribution, I can't speak, and a normal distribution would mean that the data, yes, I want to go away from it. Normal data means the data is what? If the data can be normally distributed, it has to be what kind of variable? So put a C or Q in the chat. If the data is normally distributed, we're saying it's a what kind of variable? The answer's down here also with body temperatures or race times. We did a race times earlier. We did race times. If it's normally distributed, it has to be a what variable? Because we've eliminated 2 possibilities right here. Normally distributed means it has to be a quantitative variable. So if something is normally distributed, it has to be quantitative. Great job, Lachey, right there. So since we've eliminated the idea of bar chart because it's categorical, that removes all of the above. Frequency chart is also categorical because it's just the frequency of observations, like how many occurred in this group. So a frequency chart is also wrong. So now we're between box plot and normal probability plot. And it wants us the plot that tells us it's approximately normal. So that's the plot that tells us the probability it's normal. A box plot is not the best for telling normality. You maybe tell Little Jackson, good to see you here. So it's definitely a normal probability plot right there, and understanding that you can definitely glean more from that question. This one we got wrong earlier because Brian put in the wrong values, but you need to go over to the David M. Lane for this question. For this question right here, we are given the mean and standard deviation, but I want to show you the solve for this. We're going to round that to 90,000 and use 85,000. I didn't have, let me mark this, and then we're probably going to do some 320 right after this, but I didn't have the time to go into full detail on this one at the end when we speed ran it right before class. Okay, so let's think about this. If this data is normal, so if the data is normal, if a normal model were used, what would this data look like? Well, remember the mean is about 90,000 and the standard deviation is about 85,000. So we'd write the following. Normally distributed with a mean of 90,000, I'm rounding, and 85,000 standard deviation. What do you notice happens very quickly on this curve? Canvas, we can do Canvas content here a little bit, but yeah, we went over it a lot last office hours. We'll circle back here at the end probably. What do you notice happens very quickly on this curve right here if you use these numbers? Notice what's right about to happen right here. And this is household incomes. These are household incomes. So what do you notice happens right here? This would be a very hard number to guess. What do you notice happens right here? The curve goes negative. So maybe this isn't the best idea to describe the data. So maybe the data really isn't well described by the normal. And what two values should be at the center of a normal curve? The mean is at the center normally, but if the curve is normal, then it's unimodal symmetric. So this would also be the 50th percentile. So what value should also be here next to the mean? The mean and the median, great job right there. So this is what this question is going to point to, is that the median should also be here. Now, if the mean is higher, what would it mean to us if the mean is higher? If the mean is higher than the median, so if the mean is over here and the median is over here, that means the data is what? If the mean is higher, then that means the data is what? Which I have drawn for you right here. So this is median, and this is mean. Positively skewed, right skewed. Great answer, Chase, right there. Positive skew means towards the high side. Right skew also. Both mean the same. Blake and Chase right there. Exactly. Positive, right skew, both mean the same thing. So we would say it is positive or right skewed. So if we did use the normal, we need to go over to the David M. Lane applet. Here, let's get Mr. David M. Lane on the screen for us right here. And we would need to enter in the mean and standard deviation for this question. Now, you can kind of take a guess at this because it's a little less than one standard deviation because this is the top 14%. So I'm going to add about 75,000 to that and get about 165. And this is my guess because I know I'm about one standard deviation above the mean. If you're doing the quick solve with me, you'll know the top 16% is over here. I think we have a drawing at the start where we did the top 16%. So the top 14% is a little less than a standard deviation. Got some hashtag Brian in the chat right there. So let's take a look at the actual answer. To get the actual answer, we need to go in and put the numbers, which are, oh my gosh, that's impossible to see. So let's make the David M. Lane smaller. Okay, the numbers we need are, I'm going to show it on the screen at the same time. The mean is 89930, and the standard deviation is 85,000. Now, this one doesn't give you the ability to enter in the percent. We actually want to go over here to the second button and re-enter the data again, 89930, and then 85,000. And now we're looking at the top up here, and we want the top 14%, which would be changing the area on the curve. So this is the 86th percentile. It's 181,000. How was I? Was I pretty off? Kind of. 108. Oh, because it's even higher. I went lower. Whoops. So not a horrible guess, but still not a guess that I'm that proud of today. So we're going to take this number right here and grab it. Are there any questions on how I solved for that answer right there? Any questions on how I solved for it? Good to see you here, Adam. Any questions on how I solved that number? Throw some points for Adam. Close enough for a Monday. Nah, I should have realized. I thought it was to the left of it, but it was to the right of it because we're at 16%. So I went the wrong direction. So I should have done a little bit more than one standard deviation. So sometimes you solve it a little bit wrong in your mind. You're like, oh, okay. I like to take guesses because then I do it on the applet, and if I'm close to the answer, then I get it. Let me just show the screen again with the applet picture. Once again, we are putting in the mean and the standard deviation. This is the top 14%, which is the same as saying the 86th percentile, which would be the area below. Notice how that's still the same answer we just got, which is still the top 14%. Love the applet. It's so easy to use, right, Jackson? Jackson, yeah. Have you taken stats for it? The applet makes life so much easier. My brother was doing stats, and they were having him use a Z table, and he was just having to do online work. And so, like, I don't think his class had tests, but he had to do online work. And I was like, why are you not using an applet? He's like, well, they want us to use this table and go through and find the number. And I was like, dude, here you go. Just put in the mean and standard deviation each time, and then know how to read the applet, and it'll just tell you the answer. All it does is just kind of look up a number in a table for you, and then it visualizes it for you so you can see, am I doing the 86th percentile, which is also the top 14%. So the top 14% is the same spot on the curve. So you can see it visually right there and see what the top 14% is, which is the 86th percentile. One last question. Why is this the 86th percentile? Why have I visualized right now the 86th percentile? This is important to know for the test. Like, why is that a visualization of the 86th percentile? And if you don't know, let me show you by drawing on it. And I bet someone will be like, oh, okay, I see it now. Why is this a visualization of the 86th percentile? The percentile is the area below. So if you go right here. Yep. So that line right there is dividing the top 14% from the bottom 86%. So although this is showing 14% right here, that's the top 14%, and below it is 86%. Great job right there, Blake. Excellent answers in the chat. That's what we like to do right here. But with this, I think that's done it. We'll circle back. I think we'll do more Canvas content. Oh, then we got the rest of this. Let's finish it off real quick. Choose the correct answer. Are you confident? No. It is only possible to be confident if it is unimodal and symmetric without obvious outliers. We would only be confident then if it's normal. Basically, it's only we're only able to be confident if it's normal. Choose the best answer right here. Since the median is much less than the mean, and we see that right here, the mean is here, the median is here. The distribution is likely right skewed, and that's what we were talking about at the end when we were down here in the idea of the drawing. So the mean indicates skew. If you look at the mean and it's higher than the median, it would be right skew. And if the mean is lower than the median, which would be an example down here where the mean is here and the median is over here, then that would be left skew. So we like to say the mean follows the skew. So this is going to be left skew this way, right skew that way. And always remember, draw your Monster Man, just to help you remember. Monster Man's going to help you remember that right to the high, left to the low, whatever way the Monster Man's tail goes. And left means low numbers, right means high numbers. So if you're going to put these on two respective number lines right here where they're like test scores, we might say test scores are positively right skewed or negatively, because these are the positive numbers, these are the negative numbers. So right is positive and left is negative. But there's your review of skewness right there, where we have positive and positive right skew and negative positive right skew, negative left skew. Even I got to remember that. That's why Monster Man, he came about to help you remember these things. Right to the high, left to the low, whatever way the Monster Man's tail goes. That's got it. We're done with the homework. We come back and do the quiz. When does that one due? Can you do the Canvas content? Chocolate boom. Yeah, we come back and do it right here in a little bit. You bet. We did it earlier today. So check out earlier today's video is the first thing we did. We can do some chocolate boom. We're going to do some 320. So 320 wants to talk about some correlate or associations. So where is the Tom? BAS 320. Associations. Part 2. Let's say means versus medians. Let's read this output and learn how to do the associations right here. Okay. Here we go. Okay, so we're about to do some associations. Then Chase, you got it. We'll swing back right here and do some Canvas content. Stat tool 1. Canvas content. Chocolate question. Okay, make sure we do that one here in a moment. Okay, so what is an association? If I have two variables are associated, what would that tell us? If I have two variables are associated, what would that tell us? I'm going to use a data set that we've never used in a while. Let me think of a data set we haven't used. Data. Let's go right here, body fat. I might not have enough variables. If two variables are associated, what does the idea of an association mean to you? What does an association mean to you? If I say two variables are associated. Awesome, Blake. Great work. If I say to you two variables are associated. If I say to you two variables are associated. There we go. Two variables are associated. What does the word associated mean? Oh, man. Ooh. I'm going to fix this. If else, what does associated mean? Does anyone know? If else, body fat, age greater than equal to 41. I'm old. I'm young. There we go. What does associated mean? If anyone does this, I'll be like, did you do what I did during office hours? Age group. Factor. No one knows what associated means? Oh no! Someone help me out. What does an associated variable mean? What does two variables being associated mean? What does two variables being associated mean? I had to create a categorical variable right there. What does two variables being associated mean? I created an age group variable right here. Where you can see right here we have young versus old right here as an age group. I stored it as a factor. So if you're wondering what my code did, I took the age group that someone, or the age someone was, and then if somebody was 41 or older, one can be it means if you know one, Chase, great work right there. It means if you know one variable, it tells you something about another. So when I run the associate function right here, I'm going to ask this part, not so big for your knowledge. It's a little more 474 coding to practice how to do those things. So does somebody's age group explain, and I think we want body fat. So does somebody's age group explain their body fat? So like if I knew someone was older or younger, would that tell me anything about the amount of body fat they have? We're going to go right here and do data equals body fat. So let's take a look. Ooh, well, there's something. And actually, this is really cool. I love this. So I don't want anyone doing the examples I'm doing right here. Don't copy Brian's. Don't copy for your assignment. Please don't do the one I'm doing. Don't copy for your assignment. The only way to get this would be like to do. So don't do the one I'm doing. I did like a special one right here where I created my own categorical variable. So that way it's not really from one of the data sets you would normally use. But let's take a look at this right here and think about what this would be. So don't copy this one, but let's think about it. You ready? Okay. The first thing, and this is 201 related. To compare two groups, I want to either compare the whats or the whats of the groups. And you'll think, wow, we were just doing that in 201. To compare two groups, I either want to compare the whats or the whats of those groups. If you're still here from 201, this is important to your test one also. To compare two groups, I could probably compare the whats or the whats. To compare two groups, I could probably compare the whats or the whats. Very important to 201 tests. Like if you answer these questions long, if you're in 201, you're gonna be learning for test one right now because we're right about to look at this, which we just talked about for 201 moments ago. So you probably want to compare the whats or the whats. Like you could compare these, what do we call the averages? Or you could compare these. What are our two metrics to compare groups? Don't worry about mean ranks, but that does give you a hint of the other word I'm looking for. So I want to either compare this or this for groups. What are you going to try to compare? What two metrics? I'm trying to find the assignment while we do this. What two metrics? What are the two metrics you might be comparing? So look at the question one, and then we need to think about this, how it applies. So what are the two metrics you might be comparing? Oh, we might be going over to Canvas content. We might have lost all the 320s here. Where'd everyone go? We had them 320s. We had some 320s here. So you want to compare either means or medians. This isn't 201, but it's very similar, right, Jackson? So we want to compare either means or medians, right? This is 320. So either means or medians, right? Why would you pick means or medians? Like, just this is 201 relevant right now. It's not 201, but it's 201 relevant. Like, this applies. Why would you pick means or medians? So why would you pick means or medians? Like, what would have you decide means or medians? What would have you decide means or medians? You're about to see how this really applies to your class. To be like, median, Ella right there. Exactly. Ella, so good to see you here. We're throwing 1,000 points. Median if the data is skewed. Exactly. So we want to look to see if the data is skewed or normal. What is going to be the best way to tell if the data is skewed or normal? What is the best graphic on here to tell us the probability if the data is skewed or normal? What is the best graphic on the screen right now to tell us the probability? And Jackson, good answers right there. And what's the best graphic? Be careful. What is the best graphic to tell if the data is skewed or normal on the screen right now? What is the best graphic on the screen to tell us if it's skewed or normal? Do you remember from 201? We were just doing this a moment ago on the homework. We were just doing this on the homework a moment ago. The best graphic to tell us if it's skewed or normal is the what? The best graphic to tell us if it's approximately normal. This is why I'm like, this is heavily relevant. The best data, not quite. The histogram's all right, but the normal probability plot is going to be your number one right there. The normal probability plot, and this is the normal probability plot. So a normal probability plot will tell us if it's normal if it does what? The normal probability plot, I think it's literally over here. The normal probability plot will tell us it's normal if it does what? So look at this right here. Is this normal? If it's linear, right? So no, this is not normal because it doesn't roughly follow a straight line. Roughly. This one is not normal and it's right skewed. So this is right skewed because it's pushed to the right. Check out the earlier ones where we went more in depth. But do you notice the 201 crossover here that in 320 we're using the same knowledge? So does this look roughly linear? Does it make sense, Jackson, Chase, and Ellen? Great work right here. Do these look roughly linear? And then the histogram, you can kind of take a peek at and be like, yeah, there is. Good notice right there on that outlier. And that's that dot up there that's a little bit further away than we'd expect. But I'd say this is roughly linear. So what do you decide to compare? Medians or means, which are averages? What do you decide to compare right here? Medians or means? And justify your decision. So means, exactly. Then I would say that. I would say, aside from the one outlier, blah, 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 blah. Does that make sense what someone should write up when they're talking about this? Everything we just talked about here, like looking at the normal probability plots, the normal probability plot for the older individuals is roughly following the normal distribution, except for one high outlier of an individual who had around a 48% body fat. Looking at the distribution of the normal probability plot for the younger individuals, it is very normal. The histogram shows unimodal symmetric, and the normal probability plot follows the normal line down the middle. And so thus I have decided to compare the means, which are the averages. So now let's get to the next question right here. And great work, everybody. This is what I love when we're answering the questions right here. Explain if the test is statistically significant and quote a number to justify this. Statistical significance is only the what. I'm showing you highlighted output right now. Statistical significance is only the what. Like whenever you're talking about statistical significance, you're only talking about the what. You might not know this if you're in 201, but you'll learn it as we go later in the semester. Statistical significance is only the what. And we say when the this is low, reject the null, and the this is high, just let it fly. Statistical significance is what? I'm going to throw 1,000 points for this because this is huge. You have to know whenever talking about statistical significance, you're just talking about the what. You look at that and you say it's below 0.05, which this one is. We're just talking about the, if everyone's 201, no one might know. I think we might have a 320 watching. Well, the claim, that's going to be like the null. The alternative is actually the evidence-based claim. The null is what our starting position. Great. Good try, everybody. Good guesses. The answer is the p-value. Don't worry, we haven't gotten to this yet in 201, but we will later in the semester. So the p-value tells you statistical significance. So the way to tell if something is statistically significant, no, good guesses, Chase, good guesses. We like guesses here. So the p-value is below 0.05. Do you see this p-value right here? That means it is statistically significant. This one's statistically significant. This one's also statistically significant. So if someone ever says to you, is something statistically significant? You always look at the p-value and ask, is it below 0.05? Yes, that's below 0.05. Yes, that's statistically significant. So definitely, letting the reader know that. Explain if the test is statistically significant, quote the number and explain the justification. I would quote the p-value and explain the justification. Explain the p-value interval and explain if it's conclusive or not. I might explain this one here because it would take some 320 knowledge. This is what I think the p-value is contained between. I think the p-value for my test, I am 95% confident the true p-value is somewhere between 0 to 0.007. That does not include 0.05. So this means we are confident to a certain degree that this is a statistically significant result. So if you look at this, let's look at our results up here. We have to create a test that comes back statistically significant. So I would use this as my relationship number 2 right now. This is not one that's analyzed with medians, so I can't use it for test 1. The only requirement for this one is that it follows the requirement that it's a test that comes back with medians being used. But we didn't say medians should be used here. We said means, and it is statistically significant. This one wants a test to be inconclusive. We don't have that requirement. So we need a statistically significant test right here, and there's 3 different relationships you need to do. You need to do this at least 3 times. So you might have to do it more, but you should have, this one satisfies relationship number 2, which the requirement here is that it has to come back statistically significant. So we have found something statistically significant. So now the next thing we need to do is interpret the value of the discrepancy. Now, when we talk about discrepancies right here, discrepancies are calculated by the observed over the expected when it comes to variation. And this is the value of f right here, the value of the discrepancy, classically known as an f. But if I were to tell you that the f value is 21, what would you know about the observed and the discrepancy? What would you know? Well, I could solve it out right here. What would you know? And this is just a fake solve. If the f is 21, then the observed must be what to the discrepancy? And that is the expected, excuse me. The observed amount of variation we saw was what to what we expected. Like, what does this value mean that it's 21? Like, don't even worry about those values. They show you the context of it to see what it could theoretically be. But if the F statistic was 21, chapter 5, yeah, let's do it here next. Yeah, we're going to do, so we'll do a little quick Canvas content because we did it this morning too. And then we'll do that one after that, Sarah. You got it. Let me mark that. So what would this tell you here mathematically? So mathematically, if you look at that discrepancy, you're welcome, Sarah. I'm writing it down as we speak. Part 2 quiz. So what we have right here is that the observed amount of variation is 21 times larger than what we would have expected due to random chance. So that's pretty big, right? If I say something's 21 times bigger, you're like, that's a lot of a factor increase. So the observed amount of variation between the groups was 21 times larger than we would have expected, or the observed variation. And so that's a lot bigger than what we would expect, i.e. unlikely by random chance. And that's what the discrepancy would mean right there. And the last question right here, are the differences big enough for us to care about? So if I wanted to ask, are the differences big enough for us to care about, what should I do to the numbers? This is just like your pivot table assignment, because now we're saying old people have a body fat of 20.57, young people have a body fat of 16.1%. Are the differences big enough for us to care about? What do you think I should do to these numbers? Last question here for 1,000 points. I need some help on this. What would be a good thing for somebody to do to talk about, do I care about this difference? So old people have an average body fat of 20.57. Young people have an average body fat of 16.1. I should probably quote those numbers. And I should probably find the what of those numbers. Because older people on average have a body fat of 20.57%, where younger people have an average body fat. Well, p-value tells us statistical. Good question. Good answer there, Shaq. P-value tells you statistical significance, which means the difference here is unlikely by random chance, which is important to know before we get to what we call practical significance. And if you're going to talk to someone, you might say, well, this is a difference of about 4.47% body fat. Do you think about 4 to 5% body fat is a pretty big difference? Like if you have people who differ by body fat by about 5%, is that a pretty big difference? Like you have somebody who's at 10% body fat and someone goes at 15% body fat, is that a pretty big, like they're like, I'm trying to work out, I'm trying to change, whatever I'm doing here. And this person, well, it does depend. Especially if it comes to athletes, athletes at like 5%, which is very, very low. 5% versus 10% is going to be very different. And like, I think the lowest humans be very careful, because when you get down to your organs need body fat. Like fat is not a bad thing at all times. Like fat protects our body and protects our organs. The higher the percent, I would say, yeah, exactly. When you get to the higher percentages, like 42 versus 47 is not that big of a world of difference. But when you go from like 6% body fat to 11, or imagine somebody who's at very low percent body fat, like 2 or 3, if they go up to 7, that's a huge difference. So it really does depend. So what you notice here about the do I care, it's very subjective. I do think this is something I would care about. It's a 4 to 5% difference. I would quote it that way, 4.47, which is about 4.5%. So I would say this does seem like a meaningful difference between the two groups, where younger people generally have lower body fat than the older people. So I would talk about it that way. And I'd say, yeah, it seems to me that this is a meaningful difference. Shaq, thank you so much for that input right there. Let's go do a little Canvas content. Here we go. Good answers, good questions, and that is how we interpret that output. You need to know how to interpret it and talk about differences. Do we care about those differences? We're in the Canvas content, up and going over here. Stat 201, Canvas content. And so we'll get Canvas content, Chocolate Boom, and then we're doing a My Pearson after this. It does matter. Oh, we need that.
It doesn't matter.
I have that on the soundboard. I need to bring it back. What's down here? We don't have anything. I don't have anything. Oh, let me go do that real quick. I'm gonna get this real quick and save. It does matter. It matters, Rock. We're putting this back on the soundboard. It matters. Okay, 2 seconds, because I always want to use it and then I don't have it. So let me go grab it. And we're currently on the third group. Cool. And then bottom left. This has a recording here? Oh, I recorded the sound of it. Plus, okay. Oh, it matters. Here it is. Let me save my profile now. Yes.
It matters. It matters.
What do you think of that? Do you think it's we might have to smooth it out a little more, but what do you think about this? Listen to it again.
It matters.
Because
it doesn't matter. It matters.
I think it's pretty good. It cracks me up. I'm like, maybe like, no, that's just no. All right, let's we're getting the thing, but I've got it on there now. If you want to see the world behind the world, I was loading it up right over here. It matters, yeah.
It matters.
So because it's more BAS 320. Yeah, well, Charles, we were just doing it. Let me know your questions. We just did a BAS 320 example. We can go more and do more. What are you wondering about? Let me know what you're wondering about, Charles. What you're working. Or cracking peel up. All right, let's get that Chocolate Boom question going right here. All right, 2 seconds. Canvas content. Chocolate Boom question coming up. We'll have to take a nap soon. Okay. Let me go grab. Do we have it up? Chocolate Boom. We got the Chocolate Boom Candy Company. Drop those 320. Yeah, more coffee. Waiter. More coffee. Okay, let's go do it. Could we look at a for loop on homework 4? Of course. Yeah, I thought, yeah. Let's go look at that here in a moment. Question number what? Homework 4, and then tell me the question. We'll go take a look at that here. Good question. We got a 201 after this. Let me mark this, and we'll do the Chocolate Boom right here. All right, so that is BAS 474, homework 4, for loop something. We'll go check that out here. Got it marked. Ready to go. Okay, so the Chocolate Boom Candy Company, and what do they tell us? It is normally distributed. Now, as soon as they say it's normally distributed, you're going to draw a normal curve on this. So with it being normally distributed, the first thing I want to do is draw my normal curve. We'll go over here. We'll drop in the data. We'll draw the normal curve. And there we go. That information is gleaned from it being normally distributed. And there we go. So now we need to next know the what and the what of the distribution. Anytime you have a normal curve, you need to know these parameters of it. Anytime you have a normal curve, you need to know what's and what's of it. Anytime you have a normal curve, you need to know the what's and the what's of it. Anytime, question number 5, yep, mark it. 4.5. You need to know the mean and the standard deviation. Awesome. So what is the mean of this curve? What's the standard deviation? Yep, Charles, I can go back to that. Oh, no worries. No worries. No worries. Check out, I'll review it here at the end again, too. I'll try to, Charles. You got it. So what is the mean of this curve? What is the standard deviation? Great job, Jackson, right there talking about z-scores. So the mean of this curve is it has a mean of 452 and a standard deviation here. And remember, this is just helping us remember how to do this. So it's not about solving one problem. It's about solving all problems. And 23.4. And then we would add to this. Now, this is really going to help us see where this z-score or this observation is at. We want to know about this, which is somewhere over here. And so if we go up one standard deviation, let's go ahead and add this to the curve. 452 plus 23.4, that's 475.4. 475.4, what was that? Let me double check. Yep. And so we are at 463, which is somewhere here. Can you just take a guess at the z-score? Who here can just take a guess at the z-score? No, I want the z-score of this, which is how many standard deviations that is above or below the mean. So the good thing to do is take a guess at this to know that you are understanding. There we go. Great job to share it there. Excellent answers today. What is a guess of the z-score? What is a guess of it? So when you look at it visually, and the z-score is going to be the observation. So let's write it here. Y minus mu over sigma equals z-score. And this is the observation. This is the mean. And the standard deviation is the bottom portion. And so let's see if people take a guess. People might find it exactly, but I always like to take a guess because you can take a guess where that's at on the z-score in here. That's what we're talking about, taking a guess. Like, where's that about at? 0.3, I was thinking 0.4. Lachey, I'm giving you 1,000 points just for taking that guess. But if you get it closer, I'm going to throw you another 1,000 points for being a better guess than Brian. I think about 0.4, but you might be right. Let's find out here by solving it and put in 463. I like just taking a guess to see how close we are. Observation minus mean, 452. Because if you make a mistake with the numbers, it's easy to make an error and then not realize it. But if you take a guess, you can kind of say like, well, how close am I to my guess? Well, I was really far off. What did I do wrong? So 463, the observation of our candy box minus the mean of our candy box divided by 23.4, and it's 4.5 or 0.5. Jackson guessed 3.888 is 4.47, and that's what the z-score is. So the way I visualized it, it should have probably been over here a little more. So the way I visualized it could have been visualized a little bit better. It should have been right below a half a standard deviation. So that's probably a better visual. The way I drew it might not have been so perfect, but the mathematics down there at the bottom of the screen confirms the z-score is 0.47. As long as we did the numbers right, which we should have, I hope I did, we should get 0.47 as the right answer, 2 decimal places, and we should get 1 answer correct. If you're wondering about the other ones, make sure to check out the earlier office hours. Did we get a 2 out of 10? We did get a 2 out of 10. But make sure to check out the earlier office hours where we got the other answers correct. Really good stuff right there. We're about to do some of my Pearsons, so check it out. Really good work, everyone. Just remember, it's all about practice. It's not about solving one problem. It's about knowing how to solve the problems. You're welcome. Thank you, Chase. Good questions. Remember, just drop those questions anytime. We work through as many as we can here. We've got enough time for just a little bit more here. Some Chapter 5 Part 2 quiz with something like the... It is the 53 men completed the men's downhill skiing or something. Let's go check it out. NFL data. My NFL team not doing so well, or my fantasy team. 53 men. Here it is. We found it. Oh my gosh. I need all the coffee in the world. All the coffee. Okay. Let's take the timestamp. 46. Here we go. Let's do it. Okay, we got 53 men completed the men's alpine downhill part of the super combined. The gold medal winner finished in 100.25 seconds. The accompanying tables list the times in seconds for all competitors. Let's take a look. What does it look like to you? Do you see it? There's a little bit of right skew to the data. If you look at over here on the higher numbers, the data is more pulled out. And what I mean by this is here's 100 to 101, and here's 105 to, this is a range of 6 seconds. So this shows me at the higher end of the data is more pulled out. So if you think about what it looks like, it's probably gonna be more pulled out on the high side. There's a clump of data at the start, and it's gonna tell me what the histogram kind of looks like by looking at it. Now you can always bring this into jump. I don't think we have to for this question, but it's good to understand just by looking at data right here, the data is clumped up here at the start, because look, on this row right here from 100 to 103, that's a span of like 3 to 4 seconds. Then over here, there's very few points at the end going from 106 to 112 about, and that's about 6 seconds range. So the data is more pulled out at the high side, and look at that one observation over here. If there was a bunch of high observations, you'd have a lot close to 112, but there's not. And this is a uniform distribution, very flat. This one will be clumped up in the center, which is not. I don't think it is. Let's see if around 106 there's a bunch of clumping. No, there's just 2 observations at 106, so it's not clumped up. Does that make sense? There's not a lot of observations at the 106 mark. So the data looks to be clumped up around 102. And if you look right here, there's a lot of 102s, and that's where the high concentration of data is, indicating the histogram right here. Now, this is also going to tell us that our data does not look what? Our data does not look what? Hint, it does not look this. So the data does not look this. The data does not look this. So this is our data, which is right skewed. The data does not look what? What is this shape right here? Normal, Sarah, great work right there. It does not look normal. That's going to be a big key to this question. The times had a mean of this with a standard deviation of this. If is appropriate, what percent of times would be greater than 108.27 seconds? Now, 108.27 seconds right here, let's see where it's at. They might have changed this question on me. 108.27, observation minus mean, divide by standard deviation. Ooh, interesting. That's an interesting number they did. I don't know if that's constant, but I have just found the what of this. What did I find right here by taking the observation minus the mean over the standard deviation? What did we find by doing observation for this question minus mean over standard deviation? I just found the what for this. So I did observation of this. That's the observation. Here's the mean. And here's the standard deviation. So I went observation minus mean over standard deviation. Z-score. Great job, Lachey and Sarah right there. So let's go ahead. And the mean is 103.90. And 2.65. Now, to get the exact answer to this, because the z-score is 1.65, the answer for this is going to be basically 5%, I believe. It wants the amount of times above this, I believe, greater than. Where do I need to go to solve this? To solve this, we need to go over to David M. Lane, take the z-score you find right here, and go over to David M. Lane and plug in the number. So David M. Lane applet is now in the chat, and the z-score is on a curve. What is the mean for the z-score curve? If I'm using z-scores right now, what is the mean for the curve? What's the mean for the z-score curve? Like if I'm doing z-scores, what would I put as the mean? And this is important to know if we ever draw these things out. What is the mean? Because I have it drawn here. You won't use it on the test. And so the answer to this question is going to be basically 5%. I'll show you how I know that. It'd be 0, right? 0. Great job, Ella, right there. Z-scores, we're using them still in the upper level classes. 0, 1 right there, standard deviation of 1. And now we want above 1.65, which is going to be basically 4.9% or so. And down here, 4.9%. There it is, 4.9. I said 5%. I should have just said 5% to begin with. And that's because I know some z-scores that we're using. What could you tell me on the test? Like if you z-scored this, you would know that this area has to be more than what? And I'll give you a hint for what you would have to know on the test. you would know that this area that we have in black right there is more than what percent of area. And here's a hint, which is not the answer, but you would know the area in black has to be more than what? On the test, you would know for certain that that has to be more than what percent of area? 2.5, Jackson, you got it. And it has to be less than what? So it has to be less than what? And that's because 2.5 on either side of this. That adds up to 100. And it has to be less than what? The other one that has to be less than, it can't be as much as this because that's too much. It has to be less than 16%. And I think, yep, 16, because that's the area above 1. So we could narrow it down to somewhere between 16 and 2.5, and that's how we can ask test questions to see if you know it. So that is the area right here. It has to be about 5%. Yet it did round up, round to 1 decimal. It was 4.9, but we were at 4.95. Just so you can see the answer again, was 4.95, and we round that to 5%. What percent are actually above? So the way to do this one right here, and the time is 108. It's really going to be right there where I can barely see it. There it is. 108.27. So there were 50 something. Let's find out. 108.27. So that is right here. How many are above? How many are above it? So how many? This is the easy question, but just look at that visually. We have marked where 108.27 is. Correct, Jackson. Yep, we would ask you in different ways, like the Canvas content. Woo! How many are above? You're welcome, Jackson. How many are above? So how many are above right there? How many are above? First question is just how many? 5. And then what percent is that? Great job to share it there. What percent is that? How would you figure out the percent? So 5 are above, and we just did that visually by finding out where it was at and find the percent, the amount above. Then how would you figure out the percent above? Because we know 5 are above. So what would I do to find out the percent? I dropped a hint right there. How would we figure out the percent above? Because it's 5 what? It's going to be about 8 point something. Great job, Sarah, right there. 8.9, 9.4. 9.4 right there. Now, what do you notice about these percentages? Are they super close? Like, about the same. If I say you can have 5% of my gold or 9.4% of my gold, you say, woo, it's a lot more of your gold. Do these two percentages agree? No. Why would these two percentages not agree? Good. The data is the percentages should only agree when they're no. The standard deviation, no. The data is not unimodal and symmetric. They don't agree because the data looks like this. So they're getting at right here, the data doesn't look normal, and the two percentages should agree more if the data is more normal. This should be about 5, maybe 5.8 if it was more normal. And last but not least, what can be seen from the histogram? Very easy. What do we see about the histogram? We should know it by now. The histogram is what? So remember, right to the high, left to the low, whatever way the tail goes. The histogram is definitely what right here? Histogram is definitely what? And this is the histogram we're looking at. The histogram is definitely what? Right skewed. Great job, Sarah, right there. That should do it. Woo! Getting those hundreds today. We love it. Good question, Sarah. Really good practice. Pretty much everything right here. We only needed the applet for one moment. And then thinking about how it would apply to the test, where maybe we could talk about it's between a certain area. Like the test could say, the test could give you guesses of the area. Like if the test told you that it was like 2%, you'd have to say no because it can't be 2%. So sometimes we give you possible answers and you have to narrow it down using your knowledge. So as we keep saying, the best way is to draw it out. Like test questions will look like this right here. Let's head back. Great job, everybody. We got a few more questions on deck. We got a for loop. Let me put BS320 in review a little bit. BS320. Associations. Part 2. More review. Drop those questions. We'll do a little more. Okay, let me grab the 474 assignment. Got up early today. Had a really great meeting. So just great stuff. Here we are, the clustering homework. And number 4. Okay. Always rubbing the cards. Colin, good to see you here. Yeah, it's one of my favorite shirts. I can't seem to change the fractions for the specific rows and the columns. Mine is only printing the numbers for the entire row at the moment. Oh, because this is the fraction right here. Let's go look at number 4 here. It's the k-means, right? I think I know what you're saying. Okay. Let's go take a look at this. And here we are. 5703. And so we are doing the k-means algorithm. So you need to have the Kroger scale data. Now, before you run the k-means algorithm, you need to transform your data. You need to scale your data to make sure it is everything on an even playing field and everything's normally distributed. Wait, 5 actually? 5 right here. All right, so number 5. Oh, it is question 5. You're right. It's probable to make the sense cluster on the fraction, copy the Kroger, the fraction whose contents should be the modified since the data was read into the Kroger fractions, and write a for loop that defines the value in the row I of the fraction to be the fraction of the amount of the values in the ith row of the Kroger. For example, x is a value of the vector of the $13, then the x divided by sum would be the given these 13 fractions amount. So it's the amount they spent, right? I'm thinking how much of this to do. Verify that the sum of each row, the fraction is 1. Okay, oh, and then you said change the fractions to 2. So if you want to go through here and write this, so I'm going to try to like not do the full thing. If you want to go through and figure out the fraction of how much somebody, like if you want to do this as a for loop, how many customers should we do this for to start? So Ella, how many, I would see you, Chase. Sit there, I didn't say bye. Bye, Chase. How many people should we do this to start for? How many people should you write your code to start for? So when you start making your for loop, how many people should you write to start for? Just 1, right? So you have to think about how would you find the fraction for 1 row, which we kind of give you. So how would you figure out, like, let's take the first person in the data, right? How would I just get person 1? I'm going to do some of this and then stop before we do the for loop. I'll talk the theory on the for loop. How would we just get person 1? I got just one person 1 right now. So what would I write on the end of this to just get person 1? Yep. And we could make because we're making a copy of this and calling it fractions, right? So let's create a copy of Kroger right now and call it fractions. And so now we have person 1 is right here. How could I find out how much person 1 spent? So how could I just figure out this is their spendings at Kroger right now? I just want to know how much they spent. How could I find out how much person 1 spent? How could I find out person 1 spent this amount? How could we figure that out? Well, we could, but we could just go sum of person 1, and that's how much they spent. Does that make sense right there? So we can do rows 1 through 13, but we can just leave it blank, and that'll just find the sum of person 1. Does that make sense? Like, there's so many ways to do it. That's why I'm like, I don't want to do it like totally. I want to like put the components together, or like get you the components and have you think about it, because I think you're there. It's just like, so that what you have right there is sum of the vector 1 through 13. I have sum of person 1's all their columns. Row is person 1, and there's all their columns. So now we go right here and take a look. If you combine them, what do we have? And I think we're well on our way, because this right here alone is starting to look like this here, right? He's just cheering away in the bottom corner as usual. This is where I'm gonna like try to slow down and not do as much, because that's key to it. If you get that right there, that structure, you've done it for 1 person. So now you could go through here. You have to be careful. Like, I would delete the extra work right here. Like, you could delete this. You just have to think, I'm plugging in i's right here, right? I is going to be a placeholder for the person I'm doing, because I can do the first person, I can do the second person, I can do the third, and you know what I could do? I could overwrite the value in fractions for the third. So I could go to the third row right there, and I am leaving an error. Uh-oh, what I do? Oh, I didn't do the arrow. I'm probably going to end it right here, but I think if you do, and so if you look at fractions now, I overwrote the third row. It's everything got changed to scientific notation because the third row is kind of weird. But the third row right there has the negatives indicating it's fractions. Try to put in the data frame. I'm not sure how to utilize the I to copy over. So now when you think about it, what we're going to do right here, so you have this, right? Well, so your I should go through, well, let's just talk theoretically. So if someone's listening, they'll get the theory, and then they can write it. When you write your for loop, you can just overwrite the fractions data frame with each row being re-overwritten. Your variable should be what? You can kind of answer this in the chat. Next one I won't have you, because this is pretty much the components. And your variable should be what? You might have to message me the code, Ella2. Should be I, right? And then you want to do it, so don't say this one. You don't want to just do it for the number of rows, but you want to do it through like 1 to all the rows. Like, if you know how to write that, like just go from, it'll start at 1 and it'll go through all the values of the rows. You got that? You might have to message me it. Can you message me your code real quick? I might take a look at it here live. Like, I won't show it, but can you copy paste in a code chunk into Discord your code? Yeah, send it to me, because I feel like you're there. I feel like you have it. Like, I want to see what the error is, because I think you're right there. I'll wait for the message. I feel like you're like right there. Let's see. Tell me when you message me. I'll put a little chill music on right here. We'll see what the problem is. Oh, see it? Okay. Well, is it, you haven't for loop? Oh wait, I see it. Oh, you're storing it. I would store it inside the for loop. So you're storing it afterwards. Wait, you might be able to figure out Ella with this. You're storing it afterwards. Do it inside the for loop, because you're running the for loop, but the for loop should save inside of it instead of running the for loop and saving what the for loop does. Run your for loop and let the for loop overwrite each time inside. Like this code right here is, if you put that as the skeleton but make some changes to it, every time it runs, it's going to overwrite that row in the for loop. Does that make sense? You might be able to change it to get it with just doing this, but don't store into fractions afterwards, because you're probably just getting one row, right? Yours is the for loop. Let me look at it again. You're storing. Oh yeah, I see. You're storing it afterwards though. You might be restoring it though. Oh, I see it. You're right. It's inside of there, and then you're restoring it. Okay. Yeah, I think that's the issue. Oh no, okay, it's 2 lines. Okay, sorry. Yeah, it wasn't separated. Okay, let me see. Oh, but you're using the fractions. Oh, but you're overwriting the fractions. I'd probably do it with Kroger. I don't see an error with this right now. I don't see an error right now. Yeah, well, if you do this, if you do a code chunk, here I just messaged back. You have to do the backticks like you would do in R, and it allows you to copy code, and then so it allows you to write code into Discord. So like you can put a code chunk, and then it'll allow you to do the code. Yeah, it's weird. It doesn't copyright. It's giving me an error on your for loop. I don't want to show the for loop. It's super close. Unclosed bracket. That might be part of the problem. Okay, it ran. It didn't do it. Oh, I'm storing to... Wait, were you storing to Kroger, or was I storing to Kroger? Let me look. No, you're storing to fraction. I stored to Kroger. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Let me... Ah! Okay. You might have it, Ella. This looks accurate. I don't see. And then if you do fractions scaled, what issue are you seeing with it? Well, it should sum to 1 if you do the apply on the rows. Summary, yeah, the apply. Wait, that's not. It's not rows versus columns sum. Yeah, it's not doing it right now. I'm trying to think what's wrong. Look at fraction. Oh, I did fraction. Hmm. Why? Let me rerun it here. I'm doing like the Kroger fraction. Fractions, row 1. Oh, I see it, Ella. Okay, Ella, you know what the problem is? The argument length. Tell me what happens when you run length Kroger. Run length Kroger. That's the issue. So when you run length Kroger, what happens when you run length Kroger? What do you get when you run length Kroger? So what should you change that to? What should you change that to? Yep. That's the issue. So you shouldn't use length Kroger. You should use what? Yeah, so that was the issue. I was like, it's right. The for loop's right because it works on the one case, right? So the vector was wrong. So you can put like what to put or the argument. We don't want to do length Kroger because someone would have to know what they're doing to figure this out. Because we're just talking about the vector right here. You don't want to do length for n row. Yep, n row will do it. Or I'm trying to think what else. You could do Kroger. You could take a vector inside. You could do length Kroger $, one of the vectors. That would work too. I might have said length by accident for a moment. I don't want. But, no, you're fine. No, you're fine. We're allowed to post like little bits. Like what I'm always glad if like we've posted some of this, right? Or we've talked about some of this. Like if you look at what I was doing, I'm gonna rewind time. I mean, if someone was completely stuck on this, I think I've rewound time now to where I was at. If somebody was stuck on this, do you think post a screenshot here a second? Do you think this would help somebody who is working this problem right here, Ella? Like, is this a good kind of like the theoretical idea? And then we're talking about the placeholder, we're talking about the vector. This is the kind of help I want people to have because, like, if you have no idea what to do in this class, this is going to be very hard to use. But if you're like, it might push somebody to be like, oh, wait, okay, so that's going to be my skeleton. Yeah. So don't worry. If I prompt you for a question, like, unless you're just full posting like answers in the tab, like, I don't post answers. But don't worry, you've been excellent, Al. 1,000 points right here as per usual. This is the kind of help I want people to have and to get and to give to others. To where, like, if you're asking somebody or like, oh, you need to change this. Like, if you told somebody like, oh, you've got length, Kroger, don't use length Kroger because that's going to return to you 20. We don't want to see Kroger's not even found. You need to load in your Kroger data frame now. You don't want to run length Kroger because that's the number of columns. You want the number of rows. So what should we do to get the number of rows? But it's not plural. So how do we know to use n rows versus length? So length, when it comes to it, length is usually thought of like length of vectors. Like a vector, I usually think of having a length. So length does work on data frames to get to the number of columns. So this right here is the same as ncol Kroger. So length will get you the number of columns right there. Good to see you, Benton. Where this right here, I think you can use n row on this. Oh, you see, yeah. So you can use n row on that, which does length, but you can't use n row. It gets mad. So all 3 of these, dim, Kroger, dimension 2, dim, Kroger, dimension 1. Every one of these gets you the same answer. You can get the same answer of 13 by the length of the data frame, which is the number of columns, the n columns, which is the number of columns, or the dim dimension 2, the second dimension, which is rows columns. You can get the number of rows in data frames by doing the length of one of the vectors in the data frame. Probably wouldn't do it that way. I think all vectors have to have the same length, but you could achieve it that way. I'd probably go with, preferably, I would go with n row. So my number one choice for these when finding answers is to do the number of rows or the number of columns. If we're talking a two-dimensional idea, I usually use n col or n rows for number of rows, number of columns. Length will do it. Dim dimension 2 will do it. Dim dimension 1 will do it also. Length of a vector is how long is that vector inside the data frame, which is number of rows, and then capital N row of a vector, but that will not work on a column. Yeah, and so you never see me do this one right here, and then sometimes I'll type n rows, and they'll say can't find function n rows because it's not number of rows. But if you really want, what's this? N or fun, save into n rows, take data frame, run n row data frame, and we'll just say return. So we'll say return, and then we'll do this. We'll say and then return, and we'll say thank you for using n rows instead of n row. There we go. There we go. Can't find. Wait, what did I do? Oh, need to do a comma. Return? I'll just put this outside the return. Okay. There we go. Fix. There we go. Okay. So now we go here. N rows. Someone's going to be confused. N rows, Kroger. There we go. And probably we should go here and do the following. \n. There we go. I know, right? Now we have our function n rows. Thank you for using n rows instead of n row. So now we have our custom user-defined function. Yeah, but just displaying the message like, you could go here and go stop. This is not a function. Never type this again. Now it's just a function that creates an error that says like, this is not a function. Never type this again. Probably better that we don't. I don't know. I just have fun writing stuff like that. Just feel like it doesn't even do the rest of it. We could just have the function be comment the rest of this out, and it's just a function that says don't run this function. So, and I've always found that confusing. It's just weird. But anyways, having a little fun right there. I love coding. It's just like you make little things like that that just make you smile. Well, let's do one more BAS 320 here to end. Did a little 474 coding of functions and all that good stuff. 1:14:23, time for BS 320. You're welcome, Ella. Excellent work. Okay, this is BS 320 right here. We're looking at some data. Got Shay here, got Benton, got Ella, and got Jackson. So let's look at a little 320 to end. I got to bring back up that 320 assignment. So one moment right here. With the 320 assignment, you are trying to analyze the relationship between variables. Bye, Jackson. Excellent work today. Thank you so much. Now, important stuff right here. For this assignment, you have requirements. You will analyze at least 3 when you're doing this. You could have to do more because maybe you don't meet the requirements with the ones you've done. One of your relationships must be properly analyzed by medians. Great job, Lachey. You're welcome. Another one must be statistically significant. So I'd probably say this is my statistically significant relationship, like relationship 2, probably label it that. And the third one needs to be where the p-value interval is inconclusive. Now I'm going to use the data set I created. Do not use the data set Brian created right here because Brian's creating his own sort of like, don't copy what I've done because I've created my own variables. So I can do like some examples you wouldn't have. So I was previously analyzing the body fat age group one, and you said I don't have it anymore. I've got to recreate it. By loading up here the body fat, and don't create this, I'm creating my own variable to analyze the differences between young and old people and differences in body fat. And I found a relationship that was properly analyzed, and check out the earlier part of the video, by the means because the data is normally distributed. But let's take a look at something a little bit different for this data set, and we can go here to the names of the columns, and the names of the columns in this data set are age, weight, height, neck, chest, abdomen. Let's go to that abdomen measurement. And let's analyze the abdomen by age group. Well, trying to see if I find something really good right here. Let's go to the hip measurement by age group. Let's go to hip. Not statistically significant. Ooh. But we got something going on right here. I did find something. Look at the old people right here. What do you notice about this data right here? We'll see. I'll give it a good 10 seconds right here. What do you notice about that data which makes me say, maybe I found something? That data right there is starting to look what? That data, outliers, right, Charles? So if there's outliers and skew to the data, you see the outliers up here, the normal probability plot, high outlier. So due to the high outliers and skew, the proper measure of center should be what? Due to the high outliers and skew, the proper measure of center should be what? Due to the high out, and great job, Charles, right there. Due to the high outlier and skew, we should use the median. So now we would go back and look at the data. Remember, we're looking at the QQ plot for normality, and the differences between medians are definitely what? We're doing kind of a quick analysis on it this time. The differences between medians are definitely what? The differences between medians here are definitely what? The differences between medians are definitely this. By looking at this value, which is the p-value. But remember, p-value tells us statistical significance. So is it statistically significant or is it not statistically significant? Or p-value tells you statistically significant or not. And we can look, and that's part of the requirements right here when we're analyzing it, is to figure out the proper measure, and we should explain that. It's not statistically significant, and we need to give that value to justify it. Explain the p-value interval. Is it conclusive or inconclusive? Is this interval down here, does it give us a conclusive result or an inconclusive result? So I'm looking, since I did this test, I'm looking at this interval. Is that inclusive or inconclusive? Wait, remember, if it's inconclusive, we don't know if it's significant or not. So this is a conclusive interval because it does not include 0.05 or does not have 0.05. So because we're basically confident that it's not significant. Does that make sense, Charles, right there? The interval down here on the bottom does not include 0.05. So we would say that we have concluded with confidence that this is not statistically significant. Look at the difference between hip measurements of young and old people. It's only a difference of how much? Like, explain to me, the difference is likely by random chance, and then mathematically, the difference between medians is what? Mathematically, the difference between medians is what? Just think mathematically. Like, math-wise, the difference in medians on hip measurements of young and old people, maybe in centimeters or something, the difference is, yeah, exactly, because that was the conclusivity of it down here. It's not statistically significant. Our test is conclusive that it's not. The difference between the medians is what? Mathematically, the difference between the medians is 0.0. So subtract the values 0.05. You might, I don't know where you grab that value. 0.05 is the mathematical distance between these. Does that make sense? 0.05. So the difference is basically what between the measurements of young and old people's hips? Young people's and old people's hips, the difference is basically what? The difference is basically 0, right? There really is no difference. It's like basically the same. Oh, no worries, Charles. 100 points right there. Don't worry about that. We got 30,000, man. We're throwing those big 1,000 points these days. So the difference is basically 0, right? There's basically no difference. So with there being basically no difference, the discrepancy shows us also that there's basically no difference. The discrepancy is a metric to analyze the observed amount of variation we see over what we would expect. So interestingly enough, we actually see less variation than we would even expect. The variation here is so tiny. There's like no variation. If you look at your plots over here, our discrepancy for the medians is right here, and random ones are a lot bigger. Like, frankly, we would expect there to be a little variation. We expect there to be some, but there was really no variation. So it seems to me like old versus young, does it have a relationship to someone's hip measurement right here? Old versus young, do you think it has a relationship to someone's hip measurements? Do you think that's a way to decide someone's hip measurements, like if they're old or young? Do you think that's related, associated, we should say? No, it's just likely random differences. The discrepancy is so tiny that the differences we see between old and young people is likely by random chance. We're analyzing the medians here. Even the means don't show a difference, but any which way you slice this, it looks to me that there is not a statistically significant relationship where old people and young people would have some sort of relationship between their hip size, where if you're old or young, we would have some sort of idea. Non-adults still growing. Yeah, of course. Well, yeah, it depends on how young. I mean, if we're talking about, people 10, 15, 20, then you start to see differences right there. So, but I think the data set, we could look at the range of ages really quickly. Summary from the body fat data set on age range, or this is the ages, they range from 22 to 81. So maybe that 81-year-old had a really, so we could actually see if age plays a determining factor in somebody's hip size. And actually age doesn't. Here's the one big outlier we saw over here with the really, really huge hips. That was an older person. They were about 48 or so, but look how flat this is. This is correlation now, which we were talking about in 201, but also here, the correlation is not statistically significant. It's a very just flat kind of distribution, and the differences here are likely by random chance. This is not what we're doing this week, but we're actually going to break into this. We were talking about this at the end of last week, but does that make sense, Charles, right here? Like, we see that the correlation right here between the two is not statistically significant. So nothing much going on right there. Nothing much going on. How's that looking right there for you? I'm thinking I might do an assignment on a bonus assignment, do an additional drop. But is this making sense right here, Charles? And look, we are confident that it's not statistically significant. All the output looks very similar. So if you know how to look at the p-value and say it's not statistically significant, the correlation is rather close to 0. We are pretty confident that it's not statistically significant because the p-value for the correlation is not, the p-value for 0.05 is not contained there. Over here, when we looked at age group and hip size, I'm still at work, repeat the question. Well, just understanding how to interpret the intervals right here. Remember, this week, though, I do want to point out, your graphics should look like this. Your graphics should look like this. Your graphics should look like this. So let me know if you have questions. But Charles, does that work? We did one earlier, and we have this one here. So let me know if you have questions. I'm probably going to go here in a moment. But you got it, Charles. We got a few more days on this. But good work, Charles. Great work. We have just tomorrow, right? Tomorrow it's due, and then we do have one more next week. All three graphics. Oh, you will include all 4 of these, but all 3 of your graphics that you do, one of them, let's review again, one of the relationships needs to show where the medians should be used, like with the one we just did. Now, don't do the ones I did, but you should have one where the medians should be used, so you want to see non-normal data. Another one should come back as statistically significant, which means the p-value needs to be below 0.05. Another one needs to come back as inconclusive, which means that your p-value interval contains 0.05. Yep. So the first one should be data that is skewed or non-normal, so we should use medians. The second one needs to have a p-value below 0.05, and the third one needs to come back inconclusive, which means the interval contains 0.05. There you go. Make sure to do at least 3 tests. Like, you will turn in 3 tests. You might have to do more. Like, we just did some searching for relationships where you can just change the variable name right here and then understand what to look for in the output. I was doing age group. So I made my own variable age group right there. And then if you notice right here, I looked at the names of the variables, and I could look at people's weights by age groups. And here's an analysis right here. Still a high outlier, so maybe I should use medians again here too. And each relationship should have its own write-up for the 5 prompts. Exactly. Each relationship has its own write-up for the 5 prompts. With that, Charles, great work. We'll be back here. But until then, bye for now, everyone. Bye.